Janine, I'm not sure. How do we get the screen here?
To screen share for the presentation?
Not yet. I just want to introduce us first. I see you.
Yes.
Are you on speaker view or gallery view, JD? Up in the top right, you should see a button that says speaker view or gallery view. Speaker view makes the speaker more prominent. Gallery view shows everybody.
Well,
If you hover over the top right corner of your screen,
yeah.
you'll see a button that says gallery view or speaker view.
No, it doesn't say it. There it is. Ah,
Yeah.
got it. Thanks, Paul.
You betcha. Then when you have it on speaker view,
Okay,
whoever
I can
speaks
see.
fills the
There we
screen.
go. Now it's coming. Yay. Thanks, Paul. I see a couple. Lauren George is here twice. Well, welcome, Lauren.
I have Lauren here 3 times.
I think it might be the way the link worked.
Okay. Now everybody's coming on.
As well.
Okay. I think we have more than a quorum here. So can I be heard pretty clearly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jean-Daniel Noland. I'm the chair of the Hell's Kitchen Clinton Land Use and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 4. And this is our monthly meeting for October 2020. And we have 2 items on the agenda tonight. One is the budget priorities, and the other is a development, can't remember the name, something called the Slaughterhouse, which we're going to review again. Now, as you all know, we are running this meeting remotely, and it's being recorded and transcribed. So you should know that. So I think the way it works, everybody stays mute during the presentation. And then when we have questions, I think you can raise a little fist if you have a button, or just raise your hand. I'll try to get everybody in order as best I can. Sometimes it messes up, but we'll try. And if there are any members of the public, we will certainly get to you, and you can ask questions as well. So are there any questions about how we're proceeding so far? If they're not, I'm going to start off the meeting by asking Bob Benfato to discuss our contribution to the budget priorities. If we have any, Bob has a speaking engagement a little later on, so I'd like to get him up first so we can go through that, and then we'll go into the presentation. Bob.
All right, thanks. This will be, we can do this pretty quick. Can everyone hear me? Just to make sure. And Lauren George, by the way, looks like Richard Bass, but just saying that.
Oh, there.
We had 2 capital budget priority requests from this committee last year. One was listed as a priority 1, presumably approved by the full board, and another one was listed as 14. I'm going to ask Joe about them, though. I think they also came from the housing committee. The first one was Harborview, the Harborview Terrace site.
Yes.
I'm assuming we still want to keep that, and that's still in limbo, right?
Yeah.
And the one that was 14 was senior affordable rental apartments and the multifamily preservation loan program for 560 West and 500 West 52nd Street.
Yes, those are actually now in the HB pipeline.
Okay, but we should still keep it in the.
They're not funded yet.
All right. And then we had a couple of continuing support, meaning they had gotten funding, but we keep them on the list for continuing support. One is for the apartments to be built on Site M. I wonder which one that is. Slaughterhouse site. That was listed as I'm presuming we want to keep that one. There's no ranking for the continuing support. This is continuing support. The other one is for blocks 5 and 6 of the Bella Obzick Park, which even though it has been funded, OMB is not releasing the funds due to the pandemic. They're only doing condemnation right now of money they got from development air rights sales. There's no money for design at present. And the other continuing support was 705 10th Avenue and the MTA site 806 9th Avenue. I'm assuming we all want to keep those. So if anyone wants to add anything to the capital budget, otherwise I would take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor? Just wave or something like that. Thank you, Bob, for doing that. Come
There's one
back from
more.
your,
There's one more, sorry.
Go ahead.
There's the expense requests, but that was capital. The expense was all primarily, I think everyone's gonna say yes, for extra funding, city budget. I mean, this is not gonna go anywhere, but you maintain the habit of requesting. The number one request for the board that came from us was more funding for building code enforcement at DOB and to raise updating the DOB website as a priority.
Yeah. Paul, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to share what we spoke about on the Chelsea Land Use Committee. There are two issues that came up. One is, given the fact that we're facing a financial crisis, that next year's budget, the 2022 fiscal year, won't have any money in it. We're talking about limiting our requests for things that go beyond public safety, public health, education, and housing. So any additional budget requests, we're just not even going to put in because it looks, you know, as Bob just pointed out, there ain't going to be no money, so it ain't going to be funded. So why even bother putting in the request? And just being respectful of the fact that we do have a budget crunch that we're facing. Second issue that came up was after saying all that, we want to talk about a way to look at zoning regulations such that waivers become easy enough that if there's a lot of commercial space that can be used as homes and housing locations, and it violates zoning regulations, that there's a mechanism in place for reusing empty space, particularly in Hell's Kitchen and Chelsea, that could be used as something different than currently exists in the zoning regulation. So we're looking at a lot of empty office space. What could be done with that space in the upcoming years? And would that maybe provide housing opportunities? But if housing isn't allowed in a particular zone, that we allow for that to happen in some way and to do a study as to what needs to be looked at to provide usage for currently empty spaces.
Thank you, Paul.
Those are two things we're discussing in Chelsea.
Yeah, so Paul, as a matter of zoning, in commercial areas, you can build housing and you can convert an office building to housing as of right. Storefronts can be converted to housing as of right. So I think you better temper your request. The only location we have in our district is in Hudson Yards and a few areas where you can only build commercial, and that's the commercial spine along 34th Street and 33rd Streets. So I think you're asking for something that already exists. So you should probably go back and do a little more research on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We will. I'd like to talk to you about it directly, Joe, if we could.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Joe.
And just a thing, historically, even when the city's been in bad times, we went through this in 2008, 2009, we've tended to always still list the priorities, because if you don't, then you're sort of starting over again with the city the next year. It's always good to keep them in the pipeline. You know they're going to say no, and you know there's no money, but you keep it there until it gets funded, in theory. Which does happen.
So Bob, what you're saying, if there's new priorities or new things that are on, we should list them as low priority, but we should start having them on record?
Yeah, put them on record.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
And the only
Thanks,
other
Bob.
one we had was on expense budget, was the study the impact of not requiring commercial gyms to obtain a special permit for physical culture establishments.
Okay.
There's always a split in the land use committees over that, but
You mean that's when there were commercial gyms, right?
Okay, so thanks, Bob. We'll see you soon.
yeah, I'm here till 7:30.
Okay, I'm going to ask the Slaughterhouse crew, has everybody put their name in? Yes, they have. Great, thank you. You're way ahead of me. So I want to welcome everybody from Radson and from Fox and Fowl, And John or Lauren, who's going to lead us off in this discussion? Introduce yourselves. Welcome back. And who wants to take it?
Thank you very much for inviting us. I see our presentation is already up. Is this being controlled by Community Board 4 or by our?
It's not being controlled by me. I think it's,
So yeah, I'm controlling it, so you can just let me know when to switch the slides.
okay. I mean, okay, fine.
Sure. Thank you very much again for inviting us. My name is Jonathan Butler. I'm with Radson Development. We're the co-developer of 495 11th Avenue. What I would like to do this evening is present a brief overview of the project. I know a lot of your members are familiar with the project, but for those of you that aren't or need a refresher, we will go ahead and do that. And then the reason why we're presenting is an ask for three things. One, we would like to share the most updated design with you. As last time we met, Community Board 4 had a few comments. We believe we've successfully incorporated them. So want to briefly run through the design again, share with you any updates we've made, and hopefully they're to your satisfaction. The second action we would like to take is that we are subject to the preliminary approval by the Public Design Commission because the site in question is a site that will be in ownership by the city and then will be deeded to the developer entity. In doing so, we will need a letter from the community board stating that the project has been presented to you. Generally, this is done through ULURP. However, we are coming to you prior to ULURP. So rather than a resolution being passed by the community board during the technical ULURP process, a letter would be sufficient. It could be addressed to the city, to the Public Design Commission directly, as long as it mentions the Public Design Commission and that you're aware of the current design in its current form, are accepting of it or have other comments. That would be our second ask. And the third reason we are meeting today is we'd like to go through the public plaza on 39th Street, which is directly south to the site. Prior to meeting, we haven't shared any designs. We are now at a point where we are ready to do so. This part of the site is not under city ownership. It's under state ownership through the Empire State Development Corporation. So it is being taken through a different action than ULURP. It is going through the DOT revocable consent. Therefore, we believe that the Public Design Commission wouldn't have any overview of this site because it's state land, not city land, and PDC is a city agency. Nevertheless, this is our first intro to the design of that public space, and we would like your input. So just to be clear, if there are comments to be shared with us based upon that design and presentation, we ask that not be included in the letter to PDC, only comments and questions that really address the developable site. So with that, I'd like to move on to the next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so again, I know a number of you are familiar with this site, but just for addressing this site to the public and to any members unfamiliar with the site, we are proposing a two-tower design coming out of a 5-story base. You are oriented to the southeast of the site, looking northwest. Directly to the south is going to be the hotel tower, and to the north is the residential tower. The residential tower will consist of 350 affordable units. There's no market rate component to this. All units will be affordable. And of those 350 units, up to 100 units will be supportive. On the base, we are proposing a office space that's on the second, third, third, fourth, and fifth floor, and also a supermarket that would be located on the ground floor and in the basement. Okay, next slide. This is our current time frame that we were working with. We are currently within the EIS review. We are active in working with DOT and DEP. We wish progress would be quicker. However, with everything going on, we are confident that we will be able to reach a ULURP certification by May of next year. With your help and the borough president's help, we will have a ULURP approval by December of that year, and that will put us in a position to close on the project in Q2 of the following year and start construction immediately after. So with that, if there's no other questions, I'd like to hand the presentation off to FX and Dan Kaplan to update you on the design.
Great, thanks, John. And good evening, committee members, JD and party. I'll just go through a sort of recap of sort of how we got to where we are, just in terms of precedents and so forth, and looking at the surrounding area, and then really show you some latest developments and some changes that we've made in response to your input and others. When we first got engaged in the project, I guess about 6-8 months ago, we were really encouraged to look at the context and of Hell's Kitchen, and not of Hudson Yards, and to make this a Hell's Kitchen building. And if we can go to the next slide, or next slide. And yeah, thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Janine. And you know, something that was more rooted in the context, something that had some texture, some materiality, you know, was also, from our point of view, not a Hudson Yards building in that we want, you know, we did not want to do an all glass building from an energy responsibility point of view. And we're really limiting ourselves to something like 35% glass here. So we looked at the context, and there's some beautiful buildings here. There's texture, there's materiality, but none of them are high rises really. So we looked at other, if you go to the next slide, we looked at other buildings, and I should say that the Hell's Kitchen, really it's sort of the West 30s context is really sort of almost like an industrial deco context when you really peel off everything. And so we looked at other taller buildings that were of that same ilk, including the ones in your community board with the Ralph Walker Tower on the right. And like the materiality, like the profile, the triangular profile, like the verticality, the craft. And we also, frankly, like looked at the Empire State. It was about the same time. And if you take off the top and bottom of the Empire State, it's really a very straightforward building. So we borrowed the materiality of a sort of limestone color, pewter spandrels, and look towards the sort of red window frames there, which basically serve to warm up the building. So with that basic background, then we started going to work on our building. If you go to the next slide, please, Janine. And next one after that too. So these are building blocks, and I'll work out to sort of the rendering of the two buildings together. So the first thing we did, if you look at this slide to the right, there's a sort of 3-story high frame. And so the limestone frame, the pewter spandrels, which are the horizontals between the building windows, the sort of the reddish window frame. And then we added an accent brick, which is sort of a gray rust color glazed brick that acts as an accent. And so this this sort of cladding, if you go to the next slide, is really about the outsides of the building that face outward. This is the hotel module. If you go to the next slide, it's the residential module, which is 3 stories tall, which shows a sort of texture and shadow of the building. Again, the same palette of limestone and pewter colored precast spandrels and vertical accent brick red window frames. Then if you go to the next slide, really the other flavor we're dealing with is the part where the buildings face each other. And we looked at those triangular piers in the Ralph Walker building, and we decided, like, if we did a glazed brick pier with these angles, that it would really serve to create a lot of verticality and also create some shading and shadowing. We also, if you look at those sort of triangular forms in the middle, that we call them bird's mouths or cuts. They're little medallions that add a little scale to the building. So if you go to the next slide, as we work our way out, and you see, so almost these two are like, well, this image and the images a couple before, I almost feel like are like fabric swatches, and now you really see how they look. And if you go to the next slide, you see how it, and the one after that, you see how it is deployed over the entire building, where the limestone colored precast is outside faces as the building steps back and tiers back up, and that the darker, more warm rust gray color verticals are in the middle facing each other. And if you go to the next slide, please, a little closer in, you can see how the two systems interact with each other with the lighter outer shell, we call it, sort of facing outward, and then the inner filling sort of cresting up and creating the sort of Art Deco reference tops. And then in between are just a sort of a reveal of horizontal glass. So if you go to the next slide, it shows views on the left is from 40th Street and 10th looking west. You see the hotel on the left with its glacier base and slowly transitioning to more solid top, and then the residential building on the right. One of the changes we've made is and you'll see this in a bit, is we've moved the residential entrance to the corner. So that, and also added more solidity to the base of the corner, so that, you know, based on input from some of you all and just general, that, you know, that when you walk into that residential building, you feel like you're walking into a residential building and not into a glass box or anything like that. And the gap in between the two buildings would be the commercial entrance to the market. The center slide is looking southward on 11th Avenue and 43rd, and you see that the residential building is a very classic form that steps up, and the top are those sort of fingers of the verticals coming up. And then on the right is from the park looking east over the new Javits expansion. And there you can see how some of those medallions really create a little bit of a playful pattern on the building. Next. Well, one of the things we wanted to bring to your attention was, as we've developed the design, it's really more or less stayed at the same heights. The residential has gotten slightly lower, and the hotel's gotten slightly larger. This is not due to floor area changes. It's really due to floor height modifications, but we're really dealing more with more of equal tower heights at this point. We just wanted to make sure that was clear. So next slide. So we want to go into the base where the building really meets the ground. And so next. So this is a corner of 11th and 40th. What we've done here is created more solidity to the base, and because this is the base of the residential building. So there's no two-story high expression. Every floor has a limestone colored spandrel. We've also brought down that glazed brick highlight more, and you can see the red frame of the windows. And at the bottom is the residential entrance. We'll show you in a zoom in a moment of that. But what we thought was nice about this is that, again, it's separated from the glassier, more, let's say, commercial feeling base of the hotel. It's at the corner, which is very convenient. It adds some life to that corner. It's actually, the doors are facing 11th, but the lobby really occupies the corner and has its own canopy. The piece in between, which was glassier the last time you saw an iteration of this, we've toned down. And like I said, I think we made it appropriate to its commercial character by making it the entrance to the supermarket. If you go to the next slide, this really shows the various entrances. Working from the right, the police garage entrance, which goes into a ramp into the middle of the building, the loading dock for the building next to it, the police parking, and it's another roll down door, and residential entrance at the corner, and then moving to the left, the retail entrance and the hotel entrance facing 11th. If the next slide shows a zoom of the residential entrance, and I think you could see the materials coming together here. You know, we're still developing things, but I think it's feeling more detailed at this point. So working from the center of the slide is the residential entrance with, we thought that if we take the same sort of rust color of the window frames and make that the canopy, so that there's weather protection at the residential entrance, and then the sort of limestone colored precast frames with their detail, and the brick, glazed brick highlights coming down. Again, so it's less glass, more texture, that's really comes down to the ground. If you go to the next slide, that sort of contrasts this with, now this is south looking north, the sort of hummingbird view we call it, overlooking the hotel entrance and the hotel base. You can see even on the hotel side, we're bringing down that brick pattern, but it's a little glassier, it's a little more commercial feeling, which I think is appropriate to its use, and it separates it from the residential feeling to the north. Next slide, please. So this is now looking at the building from 39th and 11th. You're looking northwest, and you can see that the residential entrance is far to the right, and then really this is really the hotel base, multiple entrances on 11th. There'll be a restaurant entrance at the corner facing 11th, and then windows that go along the side that go down to the left on the screen, adjacent to the public space. Last thing I want to say about this, and we'll before I turn it over to Star White House in terms of development of that public space, which is sort of in sketch form on the left, right behind the white car, is that one of the things we've done to the base here is as it moves up at each floor or each tier, it gets progressively more solid. So it's a little glassier down below, and by the time it gets up to the tower, it's a gradual transition to that 35% glass. I think it makes sense. I know there are two distinct parts, the building and the open space. I guess it makes sense to run through the whole thing and then go back, unless JD, you feel differently. Okay. So
That's fine, Dan.
hi. So okay. So the next slide is just, again, it's really saying what's what, and I think I've already described it. So I'm going to turn it over to our collaborators at Star White House. As John said, this is really the initial first pass at the design of the public plaza, and they're going to take you through some of the thinking and constraints and initial diagrams. So who from Star White House is doing this?
I'm Steve White House at Star White House, and why don't we just flip to the next slide? this is an interesting piece of land.
There's a,
This audio is not
yeah,
very good.
This audio is not very good.
it's very helium.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't hear you really.
Interesting.
Would you by chance have a pair of headphones available with a microphone?
Maybe, yeah, if not.
If not, I may have to switch this out if you give me a minute.
Yeah, even it's.
Yeah. Let me see this.
Yeah. If not, I'll give him a minute. If not, I will do my best to play Stephen Whitehouse, but I don't know.
And Chris,
I don't think it is necessary.
To everybody watching on YouTube, the atmosphere has not changed.
I'm going to have to switch this out, I believe.
you want me to start, Steve? I can start.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Why don't you go ahead? Because your audio is perfect.
Yeah, and I think that if you go to the first slide, we can start. And I think that Jonathan introduced a lot of this already, but just understanding the site considerations based on the various ownerships that are involved surrounding the site. So one being that the plaza is part of a mapped street and is then subject to the New York City DOT revocable consent. So there are some design items that are following those design requirements. The land just south of the plaza is owned by New York State and operates out of a Port Authority easement next to the vent tunnel, which we'll talk about. The plaza is intended to be a public-private partnership to be maintained by Radson. And we want to also provide a safe entry to the Javits Center, as well as a space adjacent to the hotel and restaurant. And we also are going to respect the existing infrastructure that's on site. So if you want to go to the next slide. So just taking a look at the site context and where we are and understanding the pedestrian and local pedestrian circulation. So these are just two spots, one along 39th Street where our plaza site is located. Looking down 39th Street towards the site, there is a lot of bus queuing that occurs there. So taking that into account with the design of the plaza. And as you can see, 39th and 11th on the corner, this large masonry wall, and just understanding that these are the areas across the street and down 39th Street. You can go to the next slide. So also understanding the future of this area and the Hudson Boulevard Park. So it's our understanding that the area up to 39th Street will be an at-grade park that is currently in design and anticipated within the next 5 years or so to be opened. And then potentially in the future, this land bridge that would go up and over the tunnel entrances. But for now, also assuming that, or for now under the assumption in terms of our design, that between 38th and 39th Street, there will be this public park that will have a connection with this local plaza. Go to the next one. Okay, so taking a look at the surrounding bike lanes and proposed bike lanes. So obviously we have the large Hudson River Greenway over on 12th Avenue. There is proposed new bike lanes going along 39th Street and 38th Street in either direction. And then bike lanes along 11th Avenue and 10th Avenue. So there is this large bike connection along the site. You go to the next one. So just understanding the future connectivity of this area, taking a look at sort of all of those factors, the bike lanes that we've discussed and the pedestrian circulation coming from Hudson Boulevard Park, and street connections via crosswalks across the north side and south side of 39th Street, as well as crossing across 38th Street and going up towards along the vent structure and running to the plaza. Go to the next one. So we took a look at the Hell's Kitchen Hudson Yard bid design guidelines and are using that as a basis for our design, understanding the different geometries within this area between Hudson Park and the High Line, and there is this sort of organic geometry and some harder lines with the High Line nearby, and understanding that as part of the design. Go to the next one. Understanding the materials in the guidelines. So this is again from the bid guidelines. It seems like, and looking at the Hudson Boulevard Park, there's this mix of just standard DOT concrete, also this granite cobble that you can see there, a mix of wood and stainless steel for furniture, and then also this pop of the sea green movable furniture there that we're trying to incorporate all of these elements into the design to create this cohesive vocabulary of materials in the area.
Kristen, keep going, but do I sound like I'm on helium now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, that's better. Switch computers, okay.
That's the Stephen Whitehouse sign, no.
Yeah.
Okay, that's much better.
Okay, you can go to the next one. Taking a look at the different future potential for plants, all of these different plants, both ornamental, some evergreen plants. They can handle both shade and sun, so those would be picked specifically for the site conditions that we have there. You can go to the next one. And these are some of the furnitures that have been laid out in the bid guidelines, using these metal planters, and again, this wood and metal benches, and following that sort of sea green pop of color that seems to be throughout the bid guidelines. So these are all just pieces that we've taken out of the guidelines that we hope to integrate into the design to, like I said, create that vocabulary within the area. Go to the next slide. Steve, do you want to jump in at all?
Yeah, I'll jump in now. And what we're looking at is a map of what would be mapped 39th Street owned by the state going through. The gray area would be the revocable consent area directly attributable to us. And we have this unusual arrangement of utilities there because they were all moved to the south side when the Lincoln Tunnel was built. So that sewer line, which is usually right on the center line of the streets, right next to the vent structure. So this is our sort of palette, if you will. It's a space that goes building to building, but our revocable consent proper is only to the middle of the street. And we've sort of dealt with that. Looking around, that is the plan on the left-hand side of the Javits, of how it is, the expansion is laid out. The orange arrow is the planned employee entrance to the Javits, so that would expect to get regular daily traffic whenever there's a show or setting up or breaking down. And the other, to a best of our knowledge, the darker maroon arrows are all emergency egress. There is an easement around the Port Authority vent structure that requires it to be clear. And there will also, of course, be fire egress out of the Javits around there. So if we go to the next. But within this space, we wanted, and within the rules of the revocable consent, which is its own sort of rules, we wanted to create a sequence of experiences. There's a 10-foot setback from the property line required, with the notion that there's an entry there, that it's more involved with being right in off the street, catching your breath, sitting down. There's a little dashed lines across the center line. The notion is that those would be the DOT bike racks, the city racks that could be used by visitors and also employees going to the Javits. Sort of central zone that is intended to be more social with movable tables and chairs. And then this bosque with these raised planters and some larger plant material. The revocable consent requires there to be this clear path that goes through it. We wanted to make it both experiential. We also wanted to make it feel very public. It's not up against the building. It's not way out away from the building. It splits this public space and sort of makes both sides of the public space feel public. And the other thing, quite honestly, in terms of the design that we have to deal with is the revocable consent being revocable means that the stuff there has to be able to be removed. So we can't really plant lots of things in the ground. We're limited to what we can put in a permanent way. And so that's why we're building it up with planters and furniture and trying to make a sense of space going through there. If we go to the next slide, which is more of a rendering of what we're doing there. And we're showing just two materials right now, right out of the Hudson Yards Hell's Kitchen bid book. The notion that there is a granite paver, which is sort of that biomorphic shape, and a standard concrete. Are there two standard materials? Some of the, you'll see them in Bella Abzug Park in the same sort of a way. And you will notice here that we are showing or suggesting the notion of extending pavement, not obstructed, but extending a special pavement and a feeling of a place across the revocable consent line. This would be have to involve the consent and agreement of adjacent property owners, of which we've not yet begun, but to make it feel like a bigger space than just this sort of half of the street next to the building, and to make it feel inviting, we thought was an important thing to explore. So we have the raised planters, these granite pavers, bench seating. There are windows that open up from a retail space in the building. It's intended to be a restaurant, but this is not being shown here as restaurant seating. This is being shown as a public place from one end to the other that culminates at one, from the street. And with a regular traffic, we expect going to and from the Javits employee entrance, even in addition to members of the public and passing tourists and Javits visitors and everyone else who may be wanting to use this space as a respite. Next. So this, in essence, trims it back to what is the exact dimensions of the revocable consent we're being asked to work with. As I said before, if we can work it out with the adjacent property owners, we'd like to extend the feel of it. But if we don't, at this point, this is how this particular approach and design would play out. And that's what we brought you today for the Plaza. Interested to see initial thoughts about what you think is desirable in this neighborhood and whether or not we are providing it, or what other thoughts you may have. And I think that is our last slide in the presentation. Isn't that right, Dan and Jonathan? So turning it back, I guess,
Thank
to
you.
the committee.
Yep, thank you for presenting. So at this time, we'll leave it up to the community board for any questions, comments you may have.
Okay, Janine can, Janine? There we go. John, thanks. And Kristen and Stefan, that's a very thorough, well thought out concept. And Dan Kaplan, thank you for the aesthetics of the design. It's always a pleasure. It's like being in class, learning all that stuff. Thank you for that. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions. Go first, Dolores.
Hi, I just wanted to say I had expected to have fatigue from this project, considering how long we have been trying to get this going. And I was very pleasantly surprised. I thought the redesign really responded well to the last meeting we had. And guess what? That was the last community board meeting we had in person pre-COVID. It was March, I don't know, what was it, like 13th that we had that meeting. And I think that in such a short time, you've really responded to the comments from this board. But more importantly, I think the design itself is so thoughtful of just what is already here and distinguishing itself from Hudson Yards. And I was also very encouraged by the ideas that you're bringing together for those public spaces and those connecting spaces, and thinking very forward of what our community would look like 5 years from now as we redesign a lot of this part of the city. So thank you for that. And I appreciate so much that I was so surprised that I'm actually excited about what you displayed on the screen. So thank you for that work. But I will say, however, the most important part of this project for me has always been about the amount of affordable housing that we have been able to put into the project. And since those items have not changed, I can't see anything at all that I can complain about at this time. So thank you so much for the presentation.
Thanks, Dolores. There's still time to complain later when go to you. I'm sure there are going to be comments. Just raise your hand so I can see you. Joe.
Yes. So Dan and the team, thank you so much. You really responded to our specific design questions. And moving that lobby, I think, made a huge difference. You've anchored the building better, bringing the brick down. Everything is, I have only one comment on design. How about that?
Right. I'm ears.
Okay. So could you please put up on the screen, Janine, the straight on shot of the building, of the elevation?
Sure, give me 1 second.
But I mean, you really moved this so dramatically ahead. Thank you so much, guys.
You're welcome. I think you were looking for slide, I think it's slide 18. That one?
Yeah, that one. Okay. So the thing here is you still have the building floating in the residential tower on the southern corner,
Yeah.
where it changes from the limestone color to the brick.
Right.
And that also, I believe, is set back. I couldn't quite see from the rendering. I think it is, right?
A little bit, about 5-6 feet, yes.
Right. So that's the only thing I think that makes this look odd, because it's a very tall, skinny building, and then it seems to float. The other side, the hotel, steps up. It's a normal thing. This is a very sort of like and Dan, I always say this to you, it's of the moment. I'd rather be less of the moment and be durable for a long period of time. So it become JD's iconic thing that he hates to talk about, right? Just figuring out a way to get this anchored down somehow so it doesn't feel like this big white 50 stories or 40 stories is floating above this solid brown brick. Any thoughts on that?
Well, thank you, Joe. We've been looking at it, and it's something, I know you've raised it before too. So I'll just tell you why we did it, and there's also one on the west side as well, if you notice. So we really see these two buildings as like as if they were once one and then pulled apart. And
I get it. I know what you did.
And I think I think there's something nice about bringing down the inner filling of that glazed brick down to the ground in the way we've done. And the other thing about the corner, it is recessed, and part of what we've been trying to do with these recesses is, as you pointed out, in other words, that the darker area is recessed, is that we're bringing more light into the courtyard and the views. So that's one of the reasons those undercuts. We can further study in terms of coloration and so forth like that, but I think the stepping of the plan is really what's the prime driver.
I'm less concerned about the stepping on the southern tower. It's the stepping in the residential, and you're really sort of doing bluntly a little bit of a gimmick so it looks like something, and it just makes the top portion float. When you live there, you don't want to float. So I'm just going to ask you to look at it, because I feel very strongly about this element here of somehow maybe you bring just the corner section of the brown brick out to anchor it down, something so it doesn't read that it's very much of this time, Dan. I mean, this is all over West Chelsea,
Can you go back two slides? I think it's 2 slides. Yeah. So, I mean, that gives you a sense of the dimension of it.
Right.
So we have, as we've developed it, it used to be much glassier. And I think you can see the area, and I can't use my pointer here, but the area right under the undercut is now that same vertical brick. And I don't know, it seems to anchor it a little bit more in 3 dimensions than it did before. Like I said, we'll take it under advisement, and we'll see if we can make our way.
Just look at the corner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Corner. That's all.
Great.
Maybe I'll speak later about the open space when you're ready for that.
Great. And I do agree with you. The moving of the lobby makes just a ton of sense. I think it's better for everything, for the.
Okay, thanks, Joe. We're gonna go in order. I think Dale was first, then David Solnick, then Chris, and then Brian. So Dale, take it away.
Thanks. I have a few questions about the presentation. Going back to the first block that had like the axonometric that had the what was residential and what was hotel and how the base was broken out in terms of commercial space. I didn't see any place where the program space for the supporting housing was located. Should it be on that diagram? Where is it?
So the supportive housing is in the residential tower, and it's accessed from the same lobby, and it's it's in the base of the residential tower.
Not
the base, but the lower. I'm sorry, just to be clear, it's the lower. I don't remember how many, like 15 or so floors of the residential tower.
Why is it separate?
Wait. Can I just follow this through? So that you're speaking about the units themselves. I'm wondering about the program space, like the support functions of the supportive housing, whether it's like common rooms or employee offices or what have you.
So there will be a supportive housing office located within that tower. We have our servicer in place, CUCS, who's used to managing this scale and has gone into some neighborhoods that have some different markets, different affordability, and I think they're well equipped to do this. But there will be on-site services. They'll be inside the residential tower among the interdispersed supportive housing units.
Okay, so it'll be on one of the residential floors.
Yes, right now it's planned for the 5th or 6th floor. So.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. And then I have to say, I like the vocabulary that you developed, that you pulled from archetypal buildings in our neighborhood and beyond. I like the way you applied it to a project of this scale. I happen to disagree with Joe that I think that the massing scheme that you've developed is quite modern and works well within the context of these more traditional building materials. I was saying, I was whispering in somebody's ear at the last meeting in March, like, look at the twin towers along the Upper West Side. And I think you've done something more contemporary and different, which is to consider them the mass and the void, joint. Like, I almost feel like you didn't design two towers, you designed a void in between two towers. And I appreciate that as somebody with, a little education in architecture. So there's that. I also had a question about the plaza. I appreciate the constraints, the design constraints of that plaza. Is that plaza graded at all, or is it relatively flat?
Right now, the drains in the existing street, rather unusually, are right down the center line. So at least our initial intention, this is before talking to DOT or anyone else on a technical level, is that it will be graded very gracefully and gradually from the building face out to that center line and sheet drain to the middle of the road.
Gotcha.
That's the concept right now.
I also like the relocated, where the lobby wound up. I think it works better. My final question is about the roof treatment. You said that there were, I think I missed what you were describing for the bulkheads. I mean, I like them, but I don't know what I'm looking at exactly. The kind of like the series of pointed elements at the bulkheads.
Yeah, so we are, in our developing the design right now, but if you recall, and maybe you can pull up that same slide we were just, that perspective we were just looking at, Janine. But basically, we're talking about, and the next one, please, I think is the zoom in. Yeah, so we're basically, the center port, what you call the void part of which I like, of the building is these vertical glazed piers. And when they get to the top, we're sort of shaving them off at an angle, almost like think about like.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
They create these sort of V shapes. We're developing that now. Just, you know, terminate the building, create a little light and shadow, create a little, you know, termination. But again, it's, you know, we're just working on that level of detail now. But that's something, that's the direction we're heading.
I like it. I mean, I know how hard it is to resolve a rooftop in New York, in the New York City landscape. I like it. It's kind of spiky. It's kind of punky. Yeah. I appreciate it.
And just in between will be just, you know, just so you know, it's really a louver screen in between those piers for mechanical and things like that. So it'll feel very coherent.
So there's the cast stone spikes and behind it a screen, like a louver screen. Okay.
There you go.
Great. Thanks for that clarification.
You're on mute, JD.
Thank you, Dale. David Solnick.
You're on mute too.
Yeah. Yeah, I had two questions, although I think you've satisfied one of them more or less. Could you go to that slide 18, which is the first, I think it was the first slide you showed in the first question. Is that 18?
No, she's not yet.
Oh.
There.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, actually my comment was about the top, looking at the left one, but I think I understand it better. So looking at the left image, those spikes, if you want to call them that, grow very naturally out of the one vocabulary, but they look like they're glued on the right tower. But I think I now understand that they're not extending from that more limestone material. They're extending from the other vocabulary, but behind. Is that
you hit the nail on the head? Yes. If you look at the image on the far right, you know, the tower on the left is the residential, and you see that there's a setback between the main like center volume of the building, and to the left the limestone volume, which is lower. And then the thing is, if you go to the one in the middle, the image on the middle, that it's like, I think it's like a 10-foot setback. You're not reading that 10-foot setback because it's collapsed.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But it's a real change in plane there. I don't see it quite as flat as this drawing.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I mean, I do have one other question, which was about the plaza, but I think overall it's, you know, much improved from what we saw in March.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, dramatically. The one thing about the plaza was I didn't really get any feeling for the plaza, to tell you the truth. I mean, we saw a plan, we saw, you know, some furniture in there, and but yeah, I mean, I'm an architect. I can take a plan and visualize, but I'm not getting any reading on this, because you know, is there anything from the ground, you know, that shows the context? There's obviously not only the context of your building, but the tower across the vent across the street, which is pretty dominant in that space as well. So, you know, really it'd be nice.
I think the quick answer is that we haven't developed those ground level views yet in time for this presentation. So we're starting with plan, and yes, we will be studying its relationship to the total volumetric space and to the facade of the building as well. So,
and will we see that?
David, we still got to go through ULERP, so we're going to have another crack at this.
Multiple cracks.
I think I want to add that plaza is not subject to the ULERP, I don't think, right? Somebody else want to clarify that? It's not
correct. This plaza is part of a DOT revocable consent, so it sits in the bed of a street that it is under jurisdiction by the state. So our process right now is that we're still discussing with ESD regarding even planning this space. We also have the southern portion of the street bed, which would not be in our scope to design. We would hope that there would be some coordination in terms of treatment that would be coordinated with that. So it would feel like one plaza, although there is emergency access, egress, etc., related to the Port Authority there. So what we really want to do, I think, in this presentation is share sort of our first thoughts around programming this space, if we're lucky to do so with ESD, because otherwise it would be pretty much a driveway, a pretty poorly no program space. So it's for our interest that it's programmed and programmed well, which is why we want to take on management of this public space. I want to just share any sort of thoughts and concerns that the community may have with us, so that as we advance our drawings, we can take that into consideration. We understand that there's going to be a variety of type of uses for this space, and as Kristen mentioned, there's going to be Javits employees coming through here, but it's also going to be used by many tourists, many people who are visiting New York City for the first time, staying at the hotel, visiting the Javits Center, etc. So we want to be cognizant of these two types of uses and make sure it's planned accordingly.
Thanks, John. Thank you. David, are you, any more questions? David?
No, that's it. I mean, I do hope that we can see that again. I mean, even if we're not officially part of the, approval process, that it's obviously an important element, a very important element to the community.
Absolutely, David. Thank you. Chris LeBron.
Evening, everyone. Thank you, JD. So I actually wanted to bring up what was going on with the POV in terms of on ground with the plaza. So thank you for clarifying that, Lauren, that there's multiple stakeholders involved. There was a mention of a change in design for increased air and light. Have you been able to do any like simulated computerized study on a 365 like light study to show any significant change increases in light for that neutral area? And then other than that, I just want to say thank you for doing this presentation. And Dolores, I think we met March 11th, March 13th was a Friday.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Brian Weber, are you there, Brian?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you're up, pal.
Okay, I have to say, the last meeting, March 11th, thank you, Chris, was the last time I was with a large group in public. I am so pleasantly surprised by where this design has come since then. I really think it's in a much different place, and I'm very excited about it. I had two questions. I think a lot of them have been answered in previous questions, but the two that I have are about the surface materials, the glazed brick, and the window frame color. Is that window frame color more of a rust color, like a Corten steel, or is it a bright red? And what is the color of the glazed brick? And is the hope that the glazed brick would pick up reflections of light throughout the day and give that sort of sheen that you'd have in some of the older deco buildings? That's design question one. And the other question is the void between the two buildings. What is on that? Is there any programming on the horizontal section or the landing? Is there an outdoor area there between the two buildings, or is that just mechanical and roof?
So, well, thanks for your comments. So the first, the materiality, yes, the glazed brick, we're getting samples now. We're in that stage where we're gathering this really specific samples. As you can imagine, it's a little bit difficult with everybody dispersed, but we're doing that. And the idea is exactly as you say, is to create something that has a sheen to it that does change during the day. What we are looking to do is get something that has a sort of combination of charcoal gray and sort of warm rust color. So it has a little bit of warmth to it. It's not cold, it's more warm. You know, we are, again, that's the intent. Trying to find a brick that does that is harder. So we're in the process of that. In terms of the window frames, the idea is to be subtle, like subtly red, not in your face red. It's hard to render these things, but I think if you look at the Empire State Building, not many people think, oh, that has red windows, but there's just underlying warmth that comes through. And then finally, in terms of the roof, so in between the two buildings, you know, we are working out the programmatic issues now, but there's a volume there that's a common space. Well, it's like amenity space for the hotel and a hotel ballroom outside of the footprint of the two towers. There may be some open space adjacent to it, but on the roof of that ballroom, what we're proposing is just a really like a passive green roof. So that look down on it, it's green. We've done some perspectives and other things, and it seems like there's other outdoor places that would be more comfortable to be in. So
thank you for greening it.
Yeah, absolutely. We would do it, but I will also say one of the good things about the new raft of codes that have come through is that either you have to have, for majority of the roof, either green roof or photovoltaics, and it's a really good thing. It really is.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Paul Devlin. Unmute, Paul. There you go.
Thank you. This looks like a great development, and thank you for the presentation. This is my first time seeing it, so this likely came up in a previous presentation, but I didn't hear anything about it today. And knowing that Joe and Dale are on this committee, I'm sure it was raised. But on the presentation, you had a loading dock of one door between the police station and the police parking lot. One loading dock door doesn't seem like it'd be sufficient to provide access for trash removal, pickup, for UPS deliveries, for FedEx deliveries, for all of those systems that we now try to get off of the streets and sidewalks in any new development. So what sort of structures exist internally to support trash and deliveries for both buildings?
Great, thanks. I believe that so the door, it showed one door, but it was a double wide door, and it I believe it has frontage for two berths, if I'm not mistaken. We can.
It does.
Yes. So we've basically met the code minimum for the hotel, and you know, the residential have obviously trash chute, trash compactor, and so forth. So there, it's not one, but it's two berths with one door.
Yeah, okay. Up to code doesn't necessarily, you know, make me feel happy, but Joe, I'm sure that you have
It's kind of a warren of passageways in the ground floor and cellar that we went through on a set of plans. It's really pretty expensive, Paul.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't presented well here, and it was only one door for two buildings. So I just want to make sure both buildings have access to adequate systems to get this stuff off of the streets and sidewalks.
Yeah, we're happy to share more of those plans again with you and your team. But yes, there is access to the hotel through a series of tunnels. And yes, while meeting code wouldn't be the overall goal, the challenge here is that we have a multitude of programs and only two sides of the site to play with in terms of accessing those programs. So to the north, we have the loading dock, and we have the parking entrances to accommodate the NYPD. So when we've had to have long drawn out conversations with DOT and even limiting those curb cuts there. And then, of course, we have all the pedestrian access to the co-working space, the residential entrance, the supermarket, and the hotel entrance. So it doesn't give us too much latitude to create more loading dock as we would have liked, but we're confident that this will be satisfactory.
So just a point of clarification, the tunnels are vehicular tunnels underneath, or are they pedestrian tunnels?
It's basically a passageway in the cellar, the basement.
So the hotel, supermarket, and housing towers all have two loading docks that then unload, and pedestrians carry goods between the buildings.
Underneath, yes, yes, that's correct.
No, it's not people, Paul. They can unload and they can move stuff through the building through various passageways. It's not like they're carrying something. I mean, these are very large passageways.
Exactly.
Bring goods and packages and
So forklifts and pallets of stuff, but not trucks moving through.
No.
So you have room for two trucks for a supermarket, a housing tower, and a hotel tower. Two berths to provide access to goods for all of that, for both delivery and removal of trash. It doesn't sound like it's adequate to me, but I'll look forward to reviewing the plans and we can continue the conversation later.
Let me just pick up on this for a second. Paul, the site is 125 foot deep, 200 feet wide, but only access on 11th and on 40th. No access on 39th. So, and we have our constraints of the police whole operation on top of it. So this site is so ridiculously encumbered. You can trust me, they have squeezed every single possible use here to make it work. It is unbelievable the sort of layering that's been done in this project so far. And we've given them hell about it, so.
Again, I apologize. It's my first time seeing it, and knowing that Joe and Dale are on this and reviewing it, I'm sure that I'm going to be the least vocal in those issues than them.
Thanks, Paul. Dale,
Thank you.
I think you had another question, Dale. Dale?
Sorry, no, I'm good. It got answered. Thank you.
Thank you. David Stolnick. You had your
Yeah,
hand?
I mean, it's a follow-up to the other one. I mean, we're not going to see piles of bags of trash on the sidewalks. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how will
the answer? Yes.
Because the trash will be containerized inside and then removed via these, these loading dock, via these vehicular access ways.
That's right. You typically see this on how towers are operated. Well, there's going to be inside access. So while trash is collected, there'll be an interior section where the trash is then consolidated into larger containers, and it'll be probably situated in the loading dock before it goes out, right to when the garbage truck is able to access on West 40th and pick up the garbage.
Thanks. Joe, you had your hand up.
Yeah.
Joe.
On the garbage issue, we need to refer you to how Manhattan Plaza works. Sanitation has a program for containerized garbage where a different truck comes for very dense high rises. And we've worked that out with a number of places, including Douglaston on 29th Street. So you have to program that in to make sure you design for it, Dan, because that's how this kind of density of housing will not work otherwise.
Yeah, so they'll be compacted and we'll look into the containerized approach.
So I have one more question on the housing program and then the public plaza.
Joe, hold on. I'll get to you, but Leslie had his hand up. Leslie?
Yeah, I had just a quick question for clarification. Will there be dispersed throughout the building affordable housing and supportive housing? They're not segregated in any way?
That was my question.
Joe, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I am concerned about the way you present it because we have never talked about a non-integrated building. This model has been done successfully throughout our community and throughout the city. And I think we're going to just say, please return to us in a way that doesn't say the supportive housing is on the lower floors and the other affordable housing is above it. This is an integrated project throughout, and that's what should be presented only. And if that's not how it's happened so far, come back and tell us so, okay?
Yeah, poor door rhymes with poor floor, and we're
Integration is the word. Integration.
so yes, the project will be integrated. I will say that the unit types for the supportive housing are currently studios and ones.
Yes, of course.
So that means that there may be a common line that the units fall into, as the lines will be situated in studios and ones. So there may be some condensing in terms of the line, the way the lines run. Obviously, we're not going to be able to use 2 or 3 bedrooms, but overall they'll be interdispersed.
Right, but there'll be studios and ones for the other part of the affordable too, so they can be
up and down the tower. Yes.
So one of the things that you're going to have to prepare coming back when you do ULURP is like a stacking plan that lists floor by floor the types of affordable housing, so there's no question, because that is something that's a huge issue in our community.
Yeah, as this will be a 100% affordable project, and
distribution is an issue.
There'll be a some version of an MIH requirement, so we'll have a stacking chart accordingly. So we haven't developed that yet, but we absolutely plan to do so, and that will be available prior to any loan closing.
Thanks, John. I think, David, you've got one more question, and then Chris, I think you had a follow-up. So David Solnick, are you there?
No, I got it answered.
Okay, great. Chris LeBron.
Thank you again, JD. Going back to supportive housing, studio and 1 bedroom. I know we talked about them in the past, but we have an increased population of New Yorkers who aren't homed. What specific programming or who is being identified for the supportive housing do we know right now? And do we know how many families are in need of supportive housing that would actually necessitate something larger than 1 bedroom? Because in my experience with working for the Coalition for the Homeless, a big problem is that we only look at studio and 1 bedroom when there are single moms out there, single parents out there, families out there, individuals who suffer from DV, who necessitate something larger than a 1 bedroom. And oftentimes they get sent out to places like Newark or Yonkers. So is there a stomach for a few 2 bedrooms available specifically to single family households, DV victims, and things of that nature?
So we discussed how the type of supportive population we'd be able to include here. Unfortunately, in order to have the proper staffing to meet the specific services for a supportive housing population, it would be very difficult to have multiple programs. So social workers that specialize in DV survivor services versus social workers that specialize in alcohol and drug addiction. Sometimes there's overlap. That's not always the case. So with this strategy, we wanted to do one thing and one thing well. And through discussions with CB4 leadership, we were discussing CUCS and that they would be adequately able to service those with their mental illness, alcohol, for this project. In terms of statistics around the need for social services, it's growing. We all know that. We as an affordable housing developer are doing a number of other projects that are serving other specific needs, including DV survivors. So, and I think the COVID crisis has just exacerbated that. I think we're going to see a lot more need, if that's even possible, in the years to come for supportive housing. So we are aware, but right now we really wanted to focus on the specific service to provide adequate services to those with mental illness, alcohol, drug addiction.
Certainly, I appreciate that, John. I only bring it up because COVID has changed what's going on at home. Additionally, we like services that may require a little bit more hands-on, maybe kit glove approach. may not be something that we can do in the future. I don't know what the timeline for this project is, but certainly we're looking at social services being approached in a different way because of COVID as well. So second question there to the social service projects is, has there been any adjustments in your programs currently that would make this a post-pandemic or pandemic-minded program friendlier, where we are ensuring that these towers aren't hotspots, clusters in the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a number of items that we've taken into consideration, and that one is with the engineering and plumbing, making sure that all units are really well ventilated, looking at really high degree of air circulation that you might not normally see in other towers. We are pursuing LEED Gold for this project, so that would create some high design in terms of air ventilation within the units. Another programming change we made or are considering in light of COVID is just the way people live and work. I think even with the vaccine coming and hopefully in the next year or two, we don't see that the way people lived and worked prior is going to go totally back to normal to that time. We understand that there's probably going to be less commuting, more families, more individuals are going to be working from home, at least part-time, in years to come. And for that reason, we looked at our community room space, and what we're considering doing is programming one as a business center, something like you might find in a hotel where it looks like a co-working space, but it's for residential use. It's equipped with Wi-Fi and the normal appliances you might find in a co-working space, computers, etc. So a tenant of the residential tower could go out there, use that, escape the, I guess, the distractions we all find at home, use the business center to work, and then come back to their unit all without leaving the building. So that's another item we looked at, and we're continuing to explore how we can best program this in light of COVID.
I appreciate the consciousness in that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm a little flabbergasted. I want to say, if you think we're going to be locked inside until the end of 2022 when you start construction, let's just all make a suicide pact right now. I mean, we'll get back to being human beings again. And by the time this building is open, what is your opening date, guys? 2023, 2024?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a future. Let's remember the future.
Joe, CBDs change, and the use of CBDs have changed already, and things are being projected for different use. And that's what I want to make sure is that we understand that as we live on top of each other,
we have a future.
We do so holistically.
That's all. Mr. JD, can I speak to public space?
Joe?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, so public space, a couple of things. One is your base information is really bad and old. That plan you have is nothing to do with the park today. You should get the updated base information. There is no pedestrian bridge flying over 40th Street to 42nd Street. That's all long gone. Pull it out of your documents and make sure you look like you haven't done your full research. Second, the question of the revocable consent is quite interesting. You should be in contact with Bob Benfato from the bid. We recently got permission to plant trees in the middle of a sidewalk on 10th Avenue between 37th and 38th Streets. And that is a revocable consent. And that was from DOT and from Parks. So I think there's a little bit more of ability to do something in the ground here, so we have a fuller plaza that gets built. The second part is you have an easement from the Port Authority. The easement, I doubt, is about, it must have some specific language, but as you know, we work well with the Port Authority. This has to be into one large 60-foot wide plaza, not a 30-foot with a little bit of granite paving. So we should be sitting down and plowing those fields now to make sure this is a nice, full, open public space. You guys are being so modest and careful seriously, where are you working? On the Upper West Side? No, this is Hell's Kitchen. We can figure this out. And so I think we have to be a lot more ambitious. And whatever pushback you're getting, let us know, Laura and George, because
Listen, you know, Port Authority has a very strict policy about that air vent, but
well, there's all kinds of ways to get to where we're going, right?
Yep.
Because other people want things from this community board for other issues, and one of those agencies is the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So we should be talking among ourselves on what to do. And then the last thing is, and then JD will appreciate this always, we do have the original cowhead sculptures from the Slaughterhouse. And we are talking about working one of them into the park, possibly one. So let's look at into the El Abzo Park. So let's look at the possibility of something actually getting put near the site from which it came.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a remarkable thing, as opposed to just being a fountain down in Chelsea. So I just put that out to the landscape designers to follow up on. And Dan is well aware of this also.
I love the cows, and the second your encouragement that we still have a lot to learn about what specifically these overlapping agencies will let us do in the space.
Yeah. And they will always start with no, right, Lauren?
Thanks, Joe. And public art, Cow's Head, public art, just consider it. Janine, do we have any callers? Is anybody calling in?
There is one person. I'm going to put them over so they can speak.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Can we, if you're muted, unmute, mysterious person, tell us who you are.
So since I made you host, you're going to need to transfer them over. If you go onto the participant section.
And then it's 6, Janine, right?
And then attendees.
You go to attendees.
Yeah, and then there's a phone number that ends in 164 with their hand up.
I don't see it. Yes, I do. Here it is.
Yeah, if you hover over them, there's some options should come up.
Okay, nobody has their hand up.
Yeah.
Which one is?
It's on the phone, JD.
I know, but the first one?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello?
They have to press *6 to speak.
Can press *6 so we can hear you?
Yes, good evening. It's Greg Lynn from HK Block Association and Worldwide Plaza. How are you?
I'm very good. Identify yourself again. We didn't quite hear that.
Sure. Greg Lynn from HK Block Association and Worldwide Plaza.
Okay, welcome, Greg.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Dan for this presentation and also for the Clinton Health Kitchen Land Use Committee for hosting this specific meeting and discussion. As a 15-year Health Kitchen resident, I'm excited about this project and appreciate the architecture and some of the mirroring aspects of the American Copper Building and some aspects even of Karankiri in here within a mix of modern art and traditional feel. So I'm definitely excited from that perspective. It does mirror some of the other areas within the city, and we're merging that together from what we have. So thank you for that. The second piece is, as reiterating what Dolores even mentioned earlier in the call as well, is the sheer number of affordable housing that will be available to the community based on this project. So I appreciate that as well. But furthering that specifically, I wanted to go back and revisit some of the questions specifically again on the amount of common spaces and such for the supportive housing that's being integrated, and specifically understanding that we're now in a COVID world and the need for interior but also exterior common outdoor spaces, whether it be rooftop plotting gardens or other spaces for individuals to congregate within the building facade but not externally to the surrounding walls, how that is being integrated or what plans might be for that to help those supportive housing individuals for their rehabilitation and social service aspects? And the second question, while I have it before I mute, as well as, is there plans to give priority to families and individuals who are currently living and working within the HK and Clinton area for these types of availabilities? Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Good questions.
Sure. So outdoor space or access to outdoor space is something that we're exploring. There is, as I'm sure you can imagine, some constraints given the scale and massing that we were given to work with. So rooftop access, et cetera, is something that we can look at. There's unfortunately not a lot of terrace space to play with. So we are a bit limited there, but we are looking at ways to best program interior common space as well. But a rooftop outdoor space is something that we're hoping to implement into the project.
Which I think you mentioned something about the top of the ballroom, which would potentially be a perfect space for that.
Yes, yeah, the common area in between the two towers that would be on top of the base. Right now, that would be a shared program space. I think we are at least going to landscape it, so it is something that's a little better to look at than just mechanical rooftop space. And we are looking to see if we can program that. There are some challenges with that, but it's something that we're still exploring while we're in design. The other part of your question is I guess relates to a community board preference. We will be discussing with some of the city agencies in the next couple of weeks regarding regulatory agreements, et cetera, and how that would be structured. In cases where there's capital funding, there's generally a 50% community board preference that would be imposed during lease up. I'm not sure if that would be invoked by the city, but it's something we can certainly look at in terms of navigating our efforts towards lease up to focus to those.
John, I'm sorry, it's required. There is no question. This will be run through the city's, lottery system. This is 50% community board preference. So that isn't like a maybe you have to navigate. So.
Right, we're just looking to see what kind of teeth would be there on such a preference.
What do you mean teeth?
And making sure that it's being able to be invoked.
Okay, I think you're giving everyone an impression that it will not be subject to the standard lottery procedure with a 50% community board preference. And this project will not proceed anywhere in any public discussion without that. So please don't even raise it as a specter of possibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Greg, for your questions. Thank you, John.
Thank you, everybody.
David, you still have your hand up, and Chris, do you still have questions? Chris LeBron?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay.
JD, I think typically the host lowers the hand, don't they, after somebody asks a question?
You can lower your hand too.
It's okay. I want to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody. John, I just have a question, and also Kristen and Stefan, I wish you well in negotiating with all the property owners. I have a question to John. 11th Avenue is a terrible avenue to cross in that area. I know we keep bringing this up, but that certainly is going to make a big difference. You're still working with DOT, trying to improve that. Yes.
That's right, we are. And recently we've seen some promising plans in the mix regarding crosswalks and access. Nothing that would be able to be shared publicly yet. I mean, it is within DOT's jurisdiction, but I can tell you that that is in the works, and that I believe when we're out of this, it'll be improved.
Great, thanks, John. And Kristen and Stephen, we certainly, as Joe said, would be happy to try to help out, fulfill your bigger dreams about that plaza. So is there any way we can see more iterations of your plans and maybe help you out with Port Authority if you need some muscle? Would that be possible, John?
I think so. Look, we'll try. We'll keep pushing, and we'll. Yeah.
Because we'd love to see keep working with you if we can. John, do you need a letter? I mean, we've written about 35 letters. Do you need? Can you just use some of the old ones, or do you need a new letter?
I love all the letters that you've written us. I really do. But unfortunately, I'm going to ask for at least one more at this time.
Okay.
That just speaks to that we presented to you on October 14th, and that it's specifically for the Public Design Commission's preliminary review. Under normal times, this would just be part of your resolution that you would do during ULURP. This is not a normal project, so not normal times. So something that says to the effect that we reviewed the design, list any comments that you may have collectively regarding it. And so that way we're able to proceed with our preliminary approval and able to move forward with ULURP.
Thanks, John. And the letter goes to PDC?
Yeah, the board's done these before, John. We have projects that we write to PDC all the time.
Great.
Okay. So Dolores, I see your hand.
I'd like to make a motion, especially considering that the last letter that we wrote was concerned about the lack of community consideration with the design. My motion is to write a letter specifically saying that the reworked design has responded well to community concerns and needs. I honestly do not think that the letter at this time needs to go into all the detail that we normally would. I think that we should be highlighting some of the areas that we have of most concern, which spoke to the programming and ensuring that there's not a pour door and that it still incorporates all of the previous things we wrote in the 35 letters that we've written over the last few years. But I do think it's important that we memorialize this because the last letter we wrote was to correct this misnomer that this was not what the community needed. So that's my motion.
We should really just put a list of bullets of the changes you made that we all like. So it's clear, just PDC looks at detail. That's what they're looking for.
Hold on, we have a motion to write a letter. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions? I do have a question, John. And in the letter, you do not want a discussion about the public area, the park? Is that what you said?
No, you're welcome to discuss it. You know, as you're aware, we're in just the start of this, and we do hope to get back to you soon regarding our advancement of the design. Our feeling is that it just wouldn't be appropriate considering PDC is a city agency and the plaza is located in an area owned by the state. So we, just to make this process, if at all simpler for a complicated project, that we just don't feel it would be appropriate for the Public Design Commission to comment on state property. But you're welcome to write the letter however you want and share your opinions.
I would offer that we write two short letters, one about PDC, another one just giving our preliminary response on the open space to the developer. That's all.
That would be perfect.
So Joe, okay, first of all,
I'll take that as a friendly amendment to my motion, JD.
So we are writing two letters. Is that?
I second that amendment and that motion for two letters.
Two letters. Okay. All in favor of Joe writing two letters to All in favor of us writing 2 letters
Aye.
about the project?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody opposed? Anybody present not eligible? Again, Dan, Lauren, Richard Bass, Kristen, Stephen, everybody, John, thank you so much for this presentation. This is just gratifying to be able to work with you all and move this project along. So thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Is there any other new business that we need to discuss, or would somebody like make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you all so much, everybody. Keep well and keep your families well.
Thank
Great
you.
meeting.
Thank you
Nice
very
job.
much.
Hi, guys.
Thanks.
Do your census.
Thank you, everyone.
Vote.